So Real Madrid won, Alavés 0, but all the talk of the town after the match was, of course, about Kylian Mbappe.
La imagen de la cartulina roja a Kylian Mbappe ha dado la vuelta al mundo por lo duro de la entrada de tu compañero a blanco. ¿Qué has pensado cuando has visto esa acción?
Es que la verdad que lo podría haber lastimado mal, ¿no? Si lo agarra con el pie apoyado, lo podría haber lastimado. Gracias a Dios no pasó eso, más allá de un raspón, pero bueno, ya se tomó esa decisión, el jugador fue bien expulsado y bueno, hay que seguir.
¿Os sorprendió al plantel que un jugador de tantísima calidad perdiera los estribos de esa forma?
No, porque son situaciones de juego, ¿no? Por ahí, no tengo ninguna duda de que haya querido pegar esa patada. Son situaciones de juego que por ahí me puede pasar a mí, ¿no? Levantamos la pierna de más y le podemos hacer daño a un compañero, pero bueno, creo que fue eso y ya está.
¿Cómo está Cristian después de la expulsión? ¿Cómo la has visto? Pues la entrada es durísima y es de roja, ¿no? Pero ¿cómo está?
Bueno, yo creo que venía un poco caliente de la jugada anterior, de que le habían hecho falta y llega un poco tarde. Es una acción totalmente involuntaria. No creo que Kylian sea un jugador que suele hacer este tipo de entradas. La deja con 10. Creo que no tiene que agradecer el esfuerzo que ha hecho el equipo, pero bueno, estamos descansados para el miércoles.
Oof, that is some spin on it from Dani Ceballos. Alex Kirkland joins us from Spain, and I'll speak to you later, Alex, about the consequences of this, but I want to speak to the former pros first. First off, you, Frank, the word intentional there was used by Ceballos in saying that no way was that intentional. As a former pro, do you disagree?
Of course, I disagree with Ceballos. You know, of course, it was intentional, and I can recognize because I've been in the middle of the park, and I know when you want to kick it or you don't want to. And what Kylian did finds no excuses whatsoever from me, because that's what he wanted to do. He was, according to Ancelotti's son, I think he was upset by some challenges before, but again, no excuses. And I want to go to Vinicius Junior. If Vinicius Junior is capable of complaining about that red card on Mbappe, why doesn't complain about the red card that he received? Because if he thinks that wasn't a red card from Mbappe, he must have thought that it wasn't a red card when he was kicked by the player that he was kicked after. So, you know, everybody has to calm down and to accept the fact that there is no excuse for Mbappe, like there was no excuse for the other, and some players belonging to the same team should sometimes just be quiet, because really, what did Mbappe is inexcusable, and he really deserved the red card.
You alluded to it there, Frank. Let's bring you those quotes from David Ancelotti. He conducted a press conference because his father was suspended for this game against Alavés, and inevitably he was asked about Kylian Mbappe. This is what he had to say. Kylian is not a violent boy. He's a boy who's asked for forgiveness and is aware of what he's done. It is a clear red card and he has paid the consequences. The many small fouls that happened to him have made him react in this way, which is not the right way. I'm not justifying it, but that is what has happened.
Blanco is lucky to have kind of stayed on the pitch and not suffered a more serious injury. So for me, again, listen, while paraphrasing and again kind of taking out some of the ridiculous language around young Ancelotti's statement, maybe Kylian Mbappe isn't that kind of player, maybe that wasn't his intention, but as challenges go, as intentional challenges go, that had all the hallmarks of the worst of them.
Well, if he wasn't that type of player, he is now. Because there's absolutely nothing other than malicious intent. You know, I said it when we showed the replay on the highlights. He's cocked his leg, he's left the ground with 2 feet, ready to jump in. He's actually cocked his leg, he's bent his leg ready, and then he's followed through. So there is absolutely nothing other than intent in this, 100%. And he needs to be treated the way somebody would have been treated had it been the other way around on Mbappe. Because Real Madrid absolutely would have been the ones crying, given it, you can't treat our players like this. So he needs to be dealt with exactly the way one of the opposition players would have been dealt with had it been the other way around.
Well, let's bring in Alex to give us the outline of how things are normally conducted when a red card is shown, what the exceptions, and what could happen to Mbappe here.
Yeah, we'll find out this week. It's the Spanish Football Federation's disciplinary committee that make the decision of what the punishment should be, how many games the ban should be for, and basically they have to decide what category this foul falls into. How do they do that? They look at a number of factors, and the main thing they look at is the referee's report, the language of the referee's report. They also look at kind of the consequences, whether there was a serious injury for the victim. In this case, Antonio Blanco looks to be okay, so that's one factor. In terms of the referee's report, that's been published, as they always are after every game. And some of the key language there is the referee says that this challenge took place basically while the ball was in play, while the ball was being disputed. Why is that important? Because that tends to mean that it's viewed as a less serious offence than if the ball was not in play, if it was something, completely away from the ball. Now, looking at precedent, looking at previous challenges like this and what's happened, the most likely scenario is a punishment of between 1 and 3 games. And it's up to the discretion of the committee whether it's 3 or 2 or 1. After that, that can then be appealed as well by the club. So let's say, for example, he gets a 3-game ban, Madrid might appeal, it might get reduced to 2. If it's a ban of between 1 and 3 games, it only applies in the competition where the offence took place. So in this case, in the league. So you'd be looking at missing games against Athletic Club next Sunday, I think it's Getafe and Celta after that. It would only apply in other competitions. Of course, the big game that's coming up on the horizon is the Copa del Rey final against Barca, April 26th. It would only kick in that competition if it was a 4-game or more ban. Then it's deemed so serious that it's in any competition. So let's see, like I said, we'll find out in the next few days, but based on precedent, the most likely scenario is something between 1 and 3 games.
Brilliant, Alex, nice and clear. Looking at it, Frank, what is interesting, Alex said, out of all of that, because the player wasn't injured, that's taken into account, which seems irrelevant, doesn't it?
It could be irrelevant. It would have been, if you go the other way around, because most of the time, we don't take into account the fact that when a player is injured, the player who created that is not punished the same amount of the player injured. It's what I would love to see that. If a player is injured 3 months, the player who created that should be suspended 3 months. Now, the fact that the player is not injured first, that's a great thing. I'm proud of one thing in my career is that I never injured a player. That's what the most I get the most pride of that in my career, really, because that's a shame. When you don't do it on purpose, it's okay. But when I see, for example, Pickford injuring Van Dijk some years ago, that's unbelievable and unbearable for me. And what did today Kylian is unbearable for me, because I know maybe he's not that type of player, but on top of it, he's a striker. A striker, they don't know how to tackle, they don't know how to scare people. As defender, we knew how to scare people without injuring them. But when he does that, he doesn't know if he's gonna injure the players or not. So the fact is not, that's a good thing for the other player, but I think he shouldn't be punished because of what he could have done. He should be punished because of what he did and what he tried to do. So I don't know what will be the punishment, but it should be severe for me.
I have no problem with the fact that it wasn't a serious injury, or the suspension kind of depending on the seriousness or lack of an injury. And while we're talking about an awful challenge here, this certainly is one in the extreme. And certainly Frank and Steve would kind of know this. As players, and you see it all the time, you hear about players saying it all the time, or when to leave a little bit on him, right? You're not really going to hurt the player, but you're just going to let him know that you're there. And it happens often. But if you go to leave a little bit on somebody in a game and he gets a bruise for whatever or whatever, that's one thing. But if that's your intention and somehow you catch that person incorrectly and their leg is planted or their leg is caught in the turf and they suffer a serious injury, I have no problem with that leaving a little bit on someone being adjudged far harsher than the same kind of action or intent and not resulting in
really
injury.
It's luck, because everyone has said, look, he's lucky that it wasn't worse.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
yes.
Because of that luck, his punishment shouldn't be as harsh.
Well, we are talking about an extreme challenge here in Kylian Mbappe's case, but so often, so many other challenges are adjudged.
To this case, Shaq.
But again, if you're using this, you have to use it blanketly. So many other challenges where I think should be the seriousness of the punishment should be adjudged on the outcome. And let's do that across the board. So in this one, while it's an extreme, I don't have a problem with the lack of a more serious outcome kind of softening the suspension.
I couldn't disagree with you more, Shaq. You know, I don't, you can't have the punishment on what the outcome is, because there are occasions when the outcome is absolutely a one-off, a complete accident, shouldn't have happened, somehow did. You can't have that. The best way to do it is if you can prove the intent.
But that's impossible.
You can't prove that.
Well, it's impossible to prove to 100%, but the way that we've been sitting telling you and explaining to you what he did, people involved in the game will be able to tell whether he has intended to hurt him. And there is no question he's intended to hurt him. Now, has he in his head said, right, I'm going to break his leg? No. As Shaka said, it's called leaving someone. We call it doing somebody. At the end of the day, when you're doing somebody, you should be punished to the fullest, regardless of what the outcome is, because the intent is where the problem is. And I know it's hard to prove, but as I said, when you've been involved in the game, that's what it should be. And the last thing is, as far as I'm aware, every disciplinary committee in the world does the same thing. They look at the consequences. Yeah. And it happened to me in MLS. I complained when one of my players were hit and were lucky the same way that Blanco was lucky. And they're like, no, it depends on the consequences.
Just one second. Four games, is that what you would go for?
Absolutely. He's 100% went for him. 100% went for him.
I'll agree. Listen, I think this is 4 games. And to add to Alex's point, I see this as the most severe of challenges. But to the point I'm making previously, Blanco snaps his leg there. I have no problem with it being 8. Right. But as we sit right now, I don't think I can sit here and make an argument that that challenge is deserving of an 8-game suspension. Had Blanco been out for a year, all of a sudden I'm thinking, absolutely, yes.
You think it's severe enough to take it beyond the 1 to 3?
Yes,
I
think,
without question, this is beyond 3 games.
Frank?
We go back to what Stevie said, you know, and I want to do a metaphor with a normal life. We try to anticipate or project the fact that if the players would have been injured, you know, maybe Mbappe would have been more punished. If you do something in a normal life, the court will take care of the consequences of what you did. And if the person is still, let's say, injured or alive, that's a big time picture, but that's what it is. So in football, it's the same. If you injure a player, you should be punished. And for me, the same amount of the injury, of the time of the injury of the players. If not, of course, you will take that into account because the player is not injured. So you will charge the player for what he tried to do. You will charge the player for the conduct and how he tried to do it. But you cannot punish the player because it could have been worse for the others. That's impossible for me.
Alex, the way you were talking, though, was suggesting that 1 to 3 is pretty much the consensus, or are there similar debates as we're having now with regards to it might be or should be more going on in Spain?
Yeah, that debate exists here as well. But listening to some former referees and some people who know how these cases tend to be dealt with here and have been in the past, they seem to be saying that 1 to 3 was the most likely outcome. Now, politics shouldn't come into this. Of course they shouldn't. But if he were to get a 4 or more game ban and he were to miss the Copa del Rey final, there will be a huge fuss here. Like I say, that shouldn't really be relevant at all. That should be sort of put to one side. But the reality is of Spanish football, when it's Real Madrid, when it's Barcelona, I don't want to say that it would be a factor, but I couldn't entirely rule it out as a factor either. So let's see, like I say, we should get a decision, an initial decision in the next few days. And after that, the club can appeal it. And then we get a verdict on the appeal as well. So we'll know sooner or later.
There was a game, of course, that took place around the red card, Alex. Not a very good game. A little bit similar to what we saw yesterday from Barcelona. Real Madrid getting the 3 points, which in theory keeps the title race alive.
Yeah, and it feels like the kind of game, the kind of performance that you get in between 2 legs of a massive Champions League tie. which is exactly what this is. I mean, the team was picked by Ancelotti, both Carlo and Davide, with, I think, one eye on the Arsenal game in midweek in terms of the likes of Bellingham and Vinicius starting on the bench and then coming on. Difficult place to go away from home at Alavés. It was always going to be a bit of a scrappy game, and it was simply a case, I think, for Madrid of getting a result, which they did. That keeps the title race alive. 4 points in it, 7 games to go. We've got that Clasico on the horizon as well. So staying in the title race and sort of getting through it, basically, which despite this Mbappe red card, they did. I think that was the main thing, avoiding injuries and then looking ahead to the Arsenal second leg.
Does it make any difference? Obviously, he can play. That's not in any doubt, any question, going into the Arsenal game.
Any difference to him?
To him personally?
No. Mbappe?
Yeah, there's not like more weight on your shoulders. No. You've got a point to prove.
No,
you want to shut up all your critics. Everyone's sitting here. Shaka saying you should get banned for 4 games.
No, no. Of every person on the planet, you were the least one thinking about that as opposed to what's going to happen against Arsenal.
Not like, I can't muck this game up. I can't be awful in this game as well, coupled with the fact that I've just been sent off. No?
Nope.
No? Don't think too much about it, Dan.
No.
Shut up.
No.
All right.